Welcome back to Imperial Wealth's Crypto Chronicle podcast, where we're recording a history book of all the events that have happened in the cryptocurrency industry. We're going to be reporting to you on a weekly basis, so let's head live over to our team right now to discuss all things that have happened in cryptocurrency this week. We're back, boys.
Turning another page.
We're writing that history book, and we're writing it well.
Adding to it.
Well, we did our last podcast last Thursday. So
it hasn't been a large turnaround.
It's been a short, quick one. I like it.
Yeah.
Not too much time in between, but there's still some interesting topics. And this week, we're actually going to spend a bit of time at the end of the podcast talking about Kaspa and Kaspa mining in particular. But we've done a bit of talk about the mining side, and we're going to go into a deep dive of what the project actually is and what our projections are for that. So make sure you hang around for that one there. Mitchell, we're going to go into the fundamental side of things. What's going on? Starting with Binance.
Yeah, so I actually say this weekly, sound like a broken
Fill us
record,
in with the latest, mate.
But yeah, well, actually on the fundamental side, since last Thursday, we haven't had a heap of news really come out that's, quite impactful or worth reporting on. But I think briefly just after that, in that afternoon or maybe on the Friday, I can't quite recall, but essentially Binance US and the CEO CZ, as we all know, essentially requested that the dismissal of the SEC's allegations occurs. They did that in a recent legal filing. So obviously, as we've spoken about in the past, across much of the start of this year, they were sued by the CTFC and the SEC, I believe. Mm-hmm. Regarding just their US arm, and I think the SEC accused them of dodgy market making or undisclosed market making and commingling funds and so on and so forth, as we've explained. But this is a bit of fight back from CZ and Binance.
We like it a lot. It looked like last week we were kind of saying they're pretty much just going to leave and who cares about US Binance anymore, but good to see, I suppose. And we were also saying that, funny enough, when the bull market comes around, they'd probably be straight back in. So.
Well, he's done the polar opposite as what SBF did. SBF rolled over with CZ's kicking and screaming, so I'm kind of all right for that.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see where this does end up, and I think we did joke last year, we'll still be talking about this case on the podcast in history, history podcast number 263, that the newest news of Binance and SEC.
I'll never leave them alone.
But I will briefly say, a lot of this case as well, and what they mentioned in the legal filing was Gary Gensler's and the SEC's aggressive overuse of the regulation, the regulatory power to kind of put their foot on the throat of the crypto industry, which they have this year, or particularly in the US, as we've seen, a lot of that innovation go overseas to Hong Kong and other places. But it's good to see recently not just Binance kicking back, but Grayscale obviously had the win, XRP obviously had the win, so maybe the tides are turning.
Yeah, I think so.
Hasn't got the greatest record, old Gensler, does he? No. I'd love to know how much they've spent, the SEC, on all these court cases for no avail, but
the legal fees would be astronomical.
Oh, huge.
Oh, yeah. Yep, they would be. I'm sure CZ's bill isn't cheap either. He did get that special lawyer that I can't remember what his name was, but hotshot lawyer to represent Binance.
Makes sense.
There's been a bit of an integration between two of our favourite projects.
Yes, Chainlink is one of the biggest is the biggest oracle, in the cryptocurrency sphere. Most people should know about their CCIP protocol, which is actually now available on Ethereum's layer 2 scaling solution, Arbitrum. So Arbitrum's obviously a project that most listeners should know about. Probably, I personally think will become the biggest layer 2 for Ethereum, given the types of projects on there, the utility, how cheap and fast it is. So essentially this integration has just enhanced the cross-chain functionality, offering use cases like tokenization, gaming, data storage and that thing. It'll be really interesting to see, how this CCIP, how far it goes in a bull market, how many other projects are integrated with it, the interoperability, stuff like that, because I think we joked last week, mentioning, I think, Chainlink again, the bear market news, I think price rallied 4% or 10% on the news. In a bull market could have done 40 to 50% based off that and its integration with the old system. And, we've discussed prior, kind of almost like the stranglehold Chainlink has, doesn't it? It's 100%. Quite a monopoly in the Oracle market.
100%. And I like that they kind of picked out Arbitrum as, one of the strongest suits, and I think in there they gave him some credit, saying, that it seems to be the platform going forward, one of the better layer 2's scaling solutions. So yeah, huge. I really liked seeing that news.
Yeah, it was good. Then just going back to a bit of funny news that most people should know, but if you'd read the cryptocurrency news, I think from early 2022 onwards, or I actually did a few articles on this, there was a couple based in Melbourne, I think maybe out in Cranbourne or something, that received $10.5 million from Crypto.com accidentally in a wire transfer. So unfortunately for this couple who didn't report it and went on to buy $4 million worth of real estate, or a 5-bedroom property worth $1.5 million, spent it overseas. I think she tried to escape to Malaysia.
Yep.
But yeah, I think they kind of played it off as if it was like they thought they got scammed and I didn't know where the money. I think they knew exactly what happened.
They knew what was going on.
You can't expect $10.5 million to come back into your bank account. Like, I didn't ever have this.
Yeah.
Like the tooth fairy owed me.
Yeah. All I can say is next time, whoever that is, come and find me and I'll help you.
Yeah. I'm surprised they didn't just leave the country.
Oh yeah, I'm surprised they're not.
You wouldn't have touched it, right? You would have just run off, put it back into an exchange, and just disappeared.
Yeah. I was surprised they weren't in Argentina living their best life with 9 of the 10 million put through tornado cash. And
you could have been on a boat in the Med in the middle of international waters and just been living your life.
Living on a yacht.
Yeah.
On the same note of all scams or bad things going on in the crypto industry, we got an update on old mate BitBoy.
Yes, it's funny. I went on Twitter this morning, and you see AI's got 30k trending topics and ChatGPT's got 7k trending. All the history around that, and then you see BitBoy and it's got 250,000 trending posts on it.
He's a liar and he's a fraud.
I'll kill you, SBF. BitBoy, for those that don't know, he's quite a hysterical character in the crypto scene. I'd probably say he's like the first true crypto influencer, as hard as that's for me to say.
That was so cringe,
in the prior bull market and bear market, he obviously built up a big brand for himself and a big YouTube following. He does a podcast. He's one of those blokes that flashes his Lambo and makes outlandish 100x calls.
Mate, he was an absolute XRP.
Yeah, well, I'm pretty sure last year I remember he applied for the XRP like head of marketing role or something, and they said don't call us back.
That's probably why, because they knew he was going to jail.
Yeah, eventually. Probably. Well, he has scammed a lot of people in the past as well, which has been proven with paid shills and dumping the tokens on.
He was meant to be coming to CryptoCon.
Yeah, he was.
So disappointed.
They removed him after the public's request.
Yeah, terrible.
I would have loved to have seen him just for shits and gigs. But
so what's he done to get put in jail? He's tried to get his Lambo back.
Essentially there was a coup, and he essentially, his team that was behind his brand, there must have been some legal loophole or something, but have pretty much kicked him out of his own brand, taken over the YouTube channel. They've seized the company, they seized his assets because it must have been owned by the company. And anyway, so
whoever set it up really helped him to get rolled.
Yeah. And so essentially their Lambo was taken by one of the business executives at the brand, and he live streamed himself on YouTube racing there today with a gun in his car and narcotics and some girl that he's having an affair with, and it's almost like a movie, to be honest.
Mate, it sounds like he's half off GTA.
Yeah, I think he's living a bit of that internet money life in GTA.
NFT.
Yeah, literally. Yeah. Now he is worthless.
He's been arrested today, and so that was all filmed. So Twitter's doing its usual role and getting that as far and wide as it can. So
I love in all of his public statements, rather than being so disappointed about his whole company being taken, he goes straight for my Lambo's being taken.
It's such a status symbol for him. I remember when he first bought it, and like the videos he would do of like, this is how you know you've hit the moon and all that. Like,
I think his get up is like a try hard Richard Hart, without like the genius or creating anything behind him. He's just like trying to ride the I wear Gucci and drive a Lambo and made millions off cryptos. But
Deplorable.
anyways, moving on to the last piece of fundamental information most people would have heard or seen. It's hard if you're in the crypto industry to not see it. That MicroStrategy and the great Bitcoin maxi Michael Saylor purchased another 150 million worth of Bitcoin for roughly an average price of 27K. So essentially this brings their total holdings to just above 158K, which has been acquired for $4.7 billion.
Wow.
So I think I read a statistic before, and I did do the maths on my calculator before, but I couldn't die on my sword here, but he does now hold 0.8% of all Bitcoin's mined.
Almost 1% of all Bitcoin.
Yeah. So, and I think we were talking about before, he's in the top 10 holders, but this is just Michael being Michael. We've spoken about the dollar cost averaging strategy on this podcast a few times now and how we employ it. But if you want to look at being a Bitcoin investor and having 240 million % conviction in your investment, then look no further than Michael, because he was buying at 60K, 50K, 40K,
I was going to say,
30K,
this
20K.
is probably one of his better buys finally.
Yeah, well, he has been buying a fair bit this year. It's bits and pieces, but Michael, unfortunately, you bought the Pico top again, which was 27K in recent weeks, besides the Grayscale P&D, but... he bought them for an average of 27K. We're obviously just north of 26K now. But, it aligns with their ongoing Bitcoin investment strategy, which started back in August of 2020. And, they've just steadily been accumulating Bitcoin. And, we discussed before what can he do? Well, sometimes, he's been leveraging debt for these acquisitions. So more often than not, he borrows and he buys Bitcoin. And what he does is he sells shares in the company and he uses those to buy Bitcoin with the cash. Which is interesting and a great strategy because, Bitcoin's up, 60, 70% this year now, with a top of 100%, but his stock is up, 2.5x or something this year. So if their stock keeps outgrowing Bitcoin, they can keep cashing in on the stock and keep buying Bitcoin. And then in the future, when there's a bull market and Bitcoin is, hypothetically at 100K and he's 4.6 billion is now worth, close to 20 billion. And their stock price will be obviously enhanced. I don't mind
what he's doing. He's kind of like trading the divergence between his stock price and Bitcoin.
I think there's probably be a lot of stuff missed. I assume an investor like him, he's hedging a lot on these. He might be buying options on Bitcoin. He might be shorting the other way. So it doesn't matter what's happening at the moment. If price goes down, I'm sure there's stuff in that. What interests me with Michael is, I was talking with Simon from CoinStash before about it, is, he does use debt to finance his buys, share sales, but we were kind of briefly discussing, what happens when that tap runs out and he has to start selling Bitcoin just to finance the company or to even maybe pump up the share price as opposed to
we were saying before when you mentioned, I was saying you probably will put the Bitcoin up as collateral.
Yeah,
take
could
out
do that.
USDT.
I think his lick price reportedly is 3K or something. He'll never be liquidated because he'll just get more finance to buy more when it's that price to bring down his margin.
Never. We thought with FTX we can't say it never anymore.
Yeah. But look no further than the US government and their borrowing and interest. I mean, if they can do it, Michael can do it. Just borrow forever and just keep buying Bitcoin.
There was, just briefly when we say US government, the other day we were looking at the top 10 holders for Bitcoin.
I was just about to bring this up, literally. Yeah.
The US government is in the top 10 holders of Bitcoin.
Isn't it 5th or 6th? Somewhere?
They're up
150,000.
I think it's unknown. They've got Mt. Gox. They've had heaps of we spoke about the Silk Road one.
Yes.
So they've got a lot of seized Bitcoin. I'm unsure how verifiable it is, to be honest. I think they're guesstimations, but
top 10 holders and top 10 thieves.
Yeah, because we don't want to get the tinfoil hats on right now for the podcast.
We'll
but
find mine.
Maybe it was the US government that has all the Bitcoin.
Yeah, Satoshi US.
Wow,
Joe Biden's Satoshi
bombs over here.
Joe Biden's forgotten that he has the million in Bitcoin.
Oh, he would. Here he's. No.
Joe, do you have the seed? Joe, where'd you put the seed phrase?
What seed?
There's a phrase.
Yeah. Alrighty. Well, that'll wrap us up for fundamental discussion. I'll quickly just run over some technical analysis stuff and some day trading before we dive deeply into Kaspa. But essentially, last podcast, we've almost had the bottom time 2 weeks ago, we were at 24.9k when we had the podcast. We then had, I think we were trading above 27k last podcast, representing the local high, and now we're back right in, wedged in between, just above 26k. So the main thing from last week's podcast on the Thursday when we held it was the interest rate pause and how this was going to impact the market moving forward. So essentially since then, DXY has received a large pump, mainly off the back of Jerome's language surrounding, rates high for longer. That's quite bearish because, cost of borrowing, blah, 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 blah. And then, so what's happened is the DXY has actually taken out its January and March prior highs, grabbing the liquidity there, for us, crypto investors, we have an inverse correlation with the DXY and the USD, so we'd like to see this start to reverse sometime soon. Now that it has taken out that high, I wouldn't rule out the 107, 108 level before that really starts to occur. So as a result, the stock markets actually did heavily tank. We've got the S&P around 4,337, NASDAQ at 14,768 as of writing. So, they were both quite heavily down from their respective levels prior to that pause. So, as a result, we're kind of sitting at 26k. Obviously, the bullish market structure for Bitcoin is still intact, as it has been this whole time. Structurally as well, if you go to a chart and you get up the monthly chart, you'll see that the 25.8 to 26k level is like very high time frame support also. So I think to round out September, which historically has been one of the worst months for Bitcoin price action, leading into October, which has been historically the best month for BTC price action, you'd probably want to see this level hold and then see us go from there. I think if we end September really, really bearish and, start seeing the 24Ks, 23Ks, then the psychological, level of the market can shift pretty quickly. So I'd love to see that
crystal ball, I know you have.
Yeah, I've got the crystal ball.
Can you give that back, by the way?
You reckon if we hold this 25, 26, start pushing towards 30, do you reckon October could see us
it's really
pushing into mid-30s?
I can see you on the edge of ecstasy, Will.
Potentially.
It's a few theses, and they obviously rely... To be honest, as an investor and a trader of this market, there hasn't been a harder time to attempt to predict the probability of outcomes because, as we've discussed in the past, the quantitative easing cycle for that decade following the global financial crisis made, just assess it. You just had to look at the halving cycles to predict. What we obviously had COVID and those added things added more bullish buying pressure, but we've got the contrary now, and I think we discussed could the halving be a non-event if we get a recession next year, or could we get a deflationary bust, or are they just going to ease rates towards the end and start printing heaps and it becomes a COVID situation? So to answer your question, the probability of us getting to 30 to 35k seems a bit of a reach right now, and I'm more inclined to think that the harshest way to get as many people out of the market is just to continue to consolidate and range. So whether that's between 23 and 28, 20 and 25, 25 and 30, we've seen, because Bitcoin dominance is at 50%, alts just continue to bleed. You get a Bitcoin pump and Bitcoin will suck all that money into it, but then when it dumps, the alts just get absolutely slaughtered. And so that's been the case for this entire year, pretty much. As dominance went from, high 30%, I think 37, 38% to 50% and beyond. That's really just been the theme this year, and it's why if you went back to January and you looked at Bitcoin at 19k and you go, Sol's at $20 at the time, great buy because it's gone as high as 35. It's almost 2x this year, but because of the recent cycle of us topping out and then Bitcoin going down but then pumping heaps and then coming down more, Sol's back at $19 and we're at 26k, 27k. So around the grounds, ETH is just below 1600, ARB's at 80 cents, as I mentioned, Sol's at 19, Atom at 7, DOT at 4. So there's a lot of cheap alts out there, and our advice is at this stage of the market, don't try and get too cute. Do what Michael Saylor does in your favorite projects that you think in the next bull run can return to ATHs and beyond, or any of those new projects, and kind of keep that mentality, because if you have that mentality, to answer your question, it doesn't matter what the market does for us this year.
For sure.
If it goes lower, as we've discussed prior, buy more. If it goes higher, great. You've been buying this whole time. If we consolidate further, just 1 week, a purchase per week into Bitcoin, to ETH, whatever it is.
I like it. Good analysis. Thanks for that crystal ball analysis.
Mate, that's a murky ball.
I think we'll go into day trading next week.
Yeah.
Just going to tap on the mining side of things. We're pushing close to 20 minutes now. So starting next week, I'm going to do a bit of a Q&A with Mitch and talking about his journey with day trading, what it was like starting out and what it's like now on his daily routine. But this week, we're going to jump into the mining side of things. Taylor, give us a general update on mining first, and then we'll go into our deep analysis on Kaspa.
Yeah, so I guess Mitch sort of summarised a little bit for how BTC's remained relatively stable in the last sort of 6-7 days since we did our last mining update. So not a lot has changed in that. I guess the biggest thing that we obviously went through last week was obviously the difficulty rise of 5.5% or whatever it was, which has obviously been a pretty big rise for a lot of miners. But at the same point, we saw a giant rise in block rewards. Mm-hmm. That has somewhat tapered down since the weekend. There was a few reports of slower transaction rates, a ton of smaller transactions sort of clogging the network, which is interesting. Obviously, difficulty going up, blocks getting sold faster. It's kind of a dilemma. That's tapered off a little bit. It looks as though we're going to have a slight drop in difficulty. At the moment, it's sort of sitting around a 2% drop. Still got about 8 days left, so it's a bit early to tell. Mm-hmm. We are sort of seeing a bit of a hash rate fluctuation. It could be, a little bit of manipulation from, Bitmain and whatnot, starting up with those S21s that they announced last week. A few test runs, all that sort of stuff. I'm presuming they're out, Q2 next year. So they're probably, siphoning up 100, 200, 300 here and there, and siphoning off to a few of their best clients. It wouldn't surprise me to start seeing a fair bit more. Movement on that front, which is going to cause us to have some big jumps every now and then when they test things.
Yeah, for sure. And on the Kaspa side of things, you want to just quickly go over the stock and then we'll go into the project itself.
Yeah, so I guess not too much dissimilar to last week in the sense that there isn't a ton of stock going around, which is a pretty positive thing, as much as it might be a bit daunting that you can't buy the one you want. It means that they're obviously still having a bit of backlog with manufacturing. I think at the moment, Ice River's, only got the KS3Ms and the KS0s. And that's for the next month or so. So there isn't a ton of stock. Order maximums for suppliers are still sitting at 15, which is, ludicrous.
I reckon they're going to sell out pretty soon.
Oh, 100%. Like we've only got a handful left of those KS3Ms for next month. Yeah. So there really isn't much left. We've only got one KS0 in Melbourne, so there's not much going on that front either. Yep. Bitmain's got some of the KS3s coming out now, but to be fair, they've sort of gone up and down with hash rate. They've got these weird ones that are 8.2s, 8.5s, 9.1s, 9.4s. There's a whole different range of them, but they are available. There's not a huge amount of them either. There's definitely quite a bit of backlog of manufacturing. Bitmain's obviously got, a lot of hands in different cookie jars and in different machines getting pre-produced and vice versa. So I think there is quite a bit of backlog of being actually able to get some online. So if it is something you're looking at in the sense of mining Kaspa, essence is now, in the sense that the sooner you do it, the quicker you can get it online. You beat the backlog, and there's no point buying a miner and then waiting for it to come online in 3 months, 4 months.
Yeah, for sure. And look, on that note, let's go through a little bit about what Kaspa actually is, what we think about it, and a little bit more about maybe their mission curve and things like that. So Kaspa, the easiest way I think we collectively agreed to describe it is it's essentially a competitor of Bitcoin Cash and Litecoin, which are both forks of Bitcoin. It is a competitor to them simply because it's basically Bitcoin but with faster transaction speeds. Yep. And the biggest, I suppose, trilemma in the development space is when you try and increase, transaction speeds or scalability, essentially, you usually lower decentralization and security. Whereas Kaspa feel that they have, to some degree, solved that trilemma, and they've done that through it's called a DAG rather than using a blockchain. In a really quick way to describe what a DAG is, essentially with blockchains, you get one block formed at a time, and then with Bitcoin, after 10 minutes, another block's formed, and it's kind of like a linear way of thinking about things. Whereas with this DAG, you have multiple blocks being formed and in a much smaller time period. Rather than 10 minutes, it's every 1 second. And then they kind of coincide together to create this, what also looks like a DNA, what I mean? That twisted. So yeah, basically that's what Kaspa is. That's what they're trying to achieve. From a analysis point of view, we like the project or not. I'm about 70 to 80% there.
Yeah.
Like if I put Arbitrum up there as like a 90 to 100% for me, or Bitcoin as a 90 100%, I'm 70 to 80% there, which is pretty high given how much crap there is out there.
Yeah.
And I'd say the biggest concerns from what I've been researching is, one, people are a little bit worried about the funding behind Kaspa. A lot of it has come from kind of community funding, and like they're asking for donations.
It's the same knock that you could have had on Bitcoin though, right? With no central governance and no team behind it.
100%. It's not as heavily funded by some organisation from the get-go or a pre-sale or anything like that.
Sometimes that's the best part about it, because there's less hands in there.
Well,
I think that's why, ETH and all them always get the knock, because they had the ICOs and blah, blah, blah.
And we'll touch on how they did their, they didn't do a pre-sale, but we'll touch on how they did the release of their tokens in a second when we get into the emissions. But yeah, essentially that's what Kaspa is. I really like it. It's got a big Twitter following. They're doing really well on the social side. They seem to have rolled out a successful project so far. Let's have a look at what they've done with their emissions. So when they first launched, basically they had a really high emission rate, and that was because they didn't do a pre-mine, they didn't do a pre-sale. The only way that Kaspa goes into the ecosystem is through mining. And what they wanted to do was to enhance decentralization. They wanted to get GPU miners the opportunity as early as possible to mine as much as possible, and they knew that ASIC miners would be built like these KS model miners, so they had huge emissions at the start and basically rewarded all those people mining on the GPU before the ASICs were made. And now already 2/3 of the total circulating supply are in the ecosystem, so we're about 20 billion of 29 billion is how many of the coins are out there right now. Now, the final kind of, before we overcomplicate this too much with new information, the final thing that we want to mention, Taylor, we'll talk about the halving. So similar with Bitcoin, every 4 years you get a Bitcoin halving, and it happens on the one day, bang, the halving happens. With Kaspa, it's a little bit different. So it happens over 1 year.
Yes. So, it happens monthly in a sense.
Yes.
Right. So every month you effectively get a 1/12 supply shortage.
Yeah.
So it's more gradual, less abrupt is probably the best way that I've seen it described.
Yep.
So I guess when they first started, the emission schedule was 500 Kaspas per second. And block reward was 440 Kaspas.
Yes.
At the moment, block reward is 174.
Exactly.
So it's dropping gradually. It's kind of good in the sense, like, as much as there's two ways to look at that coin when it comes to mining. Obviously, you've got limited amount of time to mine as much as possible within that, halving event period.
Yeah.
But it means that you're able to have a much more consistent machine.
Yeah.
100%.
It's an interesting mindset, isn't it? Like, even when you're thinking about the investing decision now, and particularly based around mining, when it comes to an early project like Kaspa, and you're weighing up how much money and how many coins you're getting per day and what the price is now, and you hear about those people 10 years ago in Bitcoin for sale, and they're mining 400 Bitcoin a day or whatever it was. And then, so maybe ask yourself, in 6 years, and I'm looking back on how much Kaspa there is now and what the price was now, and it's, 40 cents or 4 cents, whatever it was. 4 cents. Who knows,
what could that be
6-8 years,
No, it's a really, really good point, and I quite like what they've done with the like making the halving more frequent. So rather than doing it every 4 years, making it every year and averaging out over monthly.
Well, I guess it's an improvement upon those forks you mentioned before, because Litecoin's just the same as Bitcoin. The halving happens the exact same, blah 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 blah. It's really abrupt. So maybe this was their point of difference that they wanted to go for.
To me, it just is a cumulative effect of difficulty. You can factor it in together in a sense, rather than it being some severe event that happens every 1 to 4 years, whatever it is.
Yeah,
makes it a bit simpler to plan.
Had a good influence on the price as well. Obviously, there's less supply going in. There's not 480 every second. There's only 174 now every second going into the economy. The price has had a bump up. So
at the moment we're at 1200% this year.
Exactly, and
bear market.
To recap all of this, if we take ourselves back maybe 3 months ago when we first were thinking about getting the pre-sale Kaspa.
Thought it was a scam.
Yeah, well, like, we're always really cautious with altcoin miners, yeah?
And particularly a brand new manufacturer.
Yes.
Remember that. That's a huge thing to see.
As we saw the Ice River go from that 100 gigahash to the KS, that was the KS0 to a KS1, which was
1 terahash.
1 terahash. We started, getting our eyes open a bit. It was earning ridiculous amounts, $300-$400 a day.
Oh, more than like $3,000.
Oh, yeah. Right. When they first come out. We waited for it to stabilize. We're now at a point where the total network hash rate is at 24 exahash, petahash, sorry.
24.5 petahash. It's actually remaining really stable. Like, that's sort of, I guess, the biggest fact. Like, when we first talked about it, I was like, it's going to hit 50 in a heartbeat.
So it was at 10 terahashes when those KS1s were out.
No, so in June this year was 2.3 petahash.
Okay, right.
And so it's only really risen over the last, say, like 2 months, and that's mainly because obviously KS3s, KS2s, all that jazz came out and sort of pumped up onto the market in sort of like mid-August. Early August. And so we've had now like a really sharp trajectory up, which is obviously to be expected when you've got machines coming on the market that are, 10, 15 times more powerful than any GPU. It was always going to happen.
For sure.
But at the moment, over the last sort of like 5 days, it's somewhat plateaued in a sense that there isn't a ton of supply.
And most of the suppliers out there, we're struggling to get new supply. Yeah. And the good thing is the new models, they're not jumping from 8 to 20 terahash. They're jumping from maybe 8 to 9 to 10, 11. So, over the next 6 to 12 months, will we see a 10, 15 terahash? Maybe. How many of them are going to come out? I don't know.
It'd be surprising because, like, why would you cut your own nose off to spite your face in the sense of manufacturers? Like, you're making enough money selling the 8s.
Exactly. And as you and I said, so what's the ROI? It's like 6 months or so? No,
like 100, 120 days.
Well, even less then.
Yeah, it's ludicrous.
So it's under 6 months, so 4 months or so, let's say. Yeah. They'd be crazy not to let these purchasers get their money back. What are they going to do when they release the new miner? Buy more, exactly. Yeah. So what started as probably a little bit of a punt, I would say. When we bought the Kaspa miners, it's actually been quite a pleasant surprise. They're doing very well, and what I want to finish on is it could be, if it continues like this could be really good for Bitcoin mining. It's pulling. All these facilities are set up to mine cryptocurrency. When you get these new coins coming out, that pushes hash rate away from, just flooding the Bitcoin market and onto these other altcoins. That's substantially beneficial to existing Bitcoin miners. So
it also brings more people into the space. I think that's a huge positive that I've seen. Is you've got way more people showing interest because, like, obviously, you Google Bitcoin mining at the moment, it's not exactly blowing your socks off. Whereas, you see, this miner's making $300-$400 a day profit. You're looking at it going, why am I not doing this? It's like having a second job.
Yeah, and usually, like, when these miners come out, I'm saying to people, just be careful. It doesn't happen forever, but
it's remained stable for the last few weeks. And like, obviously, more and more people coming on, it's going to push it up. But at the same point, the coin price is justifying that. Yep. You know what I mean? It's still continuing to go up. Like, it put an all-time high in last Wednesday.
And that's probably one thing that we missed was its 500 mil market cap. So sitting in the top 50 coins, probably has to 10x to get something of what Litecoin or Bitcoin Cash is.
That's still pretty good considering the age of the coin.
100%.
You know what I mean? It's only like 11, 12 months.
100%. I think it's got legs to move. The ecosystem and economy with mining rewards is what's the word I'm looking for?
That's a good question, Wilbur.
It's good.
It's good, very good. Yes.
It's not too bad earning $400 a day on these miners. So
it is not bad. It's a good Christmas fund, isn't it?
It is. It is indeed.
Christmas party's going to be good.
That's enough of pumping our own jets and what we've been doing with Kaspa miners.
Obviously, like, reach out if it's something that you want to look at.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like, we're always happy to have a chat. Like, obviously, I'm happy to talk to anyone about Kaspa as it's a bit interesting. So reach out if it's something of interest.
Definitely. That's really good. Hopefully that gives everyone a little bit of insight, a lot of information there, but feel free to listen over that. And we will be back next week. And as I say, we'll be going into a bit of a deep dive with Mitchell on the Day Trading Academy and what his journey's been like as a trader and what people coming into it can expect.
Yep. Sounds good.
Love it. Anyway, and last thing to note as well, anyone who's ordering an S19K, if you're still on the fence, it ends at the end of this week.
Beautiful.
Nice.
Get in contact before it raises by 25%. Be warned.
Probably more.
Yeah, at this rate, it could be more, yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Alrighty. Thank
Great
you.
week. Thanks,
All
everyone.
right, cheers, guys.